Chapter 9. A Blending of Talent. Jack knew that the Colombians or Taggert would have a backup tail on either the load itself or the courier, so he prepared himself to deal with whichever one came up. Perhaps it would be a double middle, with both sides sending neutral middlemen, or it could even be a blind drop, which he immediately discounted because it was the first-time situation, and almost never did first-time deals go smoothly, especially with $10 million involved. He was certain that Taggert would put a tail on Ramirez from the moment he picked up the money until he returned with the load. If he could identify the tail and neutralize him, then Ramirez could work freely. But this could also be fatal for him, because if the tail were taken out and Ramirez returned anyway, Taggert would think everything was all right. He wouldn't find out until later that something was wrong, and then it would be too late anyway. Jack continued to weigh the possibilities as he drove back to his hotel. As he prepared to leave for Mexico City, he hoped that Ramirez had enough sense to leave in the daylight and not break under cover of darkness. Ramirez, in actuality, had started to pack and was prepared to leave at dawn the following day. His greatest concern was how to recognize his tail, and he thought of numerous ways and diversions to flush him from hiding. He finally arrived at staging a flat tire as his only recourse, hoping that sometime during the changing of the tire he would recognize that someone was watching him too closely. Once identified, the tail could be neutralized in time. Fernando Leon had been on Taggert's payroll since he first arrived in Culiacan, mostly for menial tasks, like scoring cocaine when necessary. He thought of Taggert as a rich gringo who was wasting time in Mexico on an extended vacation. He did what was asked of him, so he was delighted when Taggert informed him that he was to take a trip to Mexico City and shadow Juan Ramirez. It would be the easiest money Fernando would ever earn. His family would be happy with the gifts he would bring back, and he could surely use the $1,000 that Taggert had promised him. All he had to do was follow Ramirez and call in if something went wrong. What he failed to realize was that he was expendable. And like most expendable commodities, his well-being was not a consideration with Harlan Taggert. In fact, Taggert's only consideration for Fernando was if he did exactly as he told, then he would receive $1,000. If Ramirez got to Fernando and they took him out, he saved Taggert the trouble, because Fernando would at least be alive. If he failed in his mission, not a pretty corpse he would make for the local obituary writers. On the other side of the dilemma was Enrique Torreon, who at last would have the responsibility he deserved. After this deal went down, his father could no longer ignore his organizational capabilities. His field training stint would be over, and he could assume his rightful place as the head of the Torreon family. It was coming down real soon, and Enrique was starting to feel the tension that accompanies deals of this velocity. His bodyguards had a dual responsibility: one, to protect Enrique, and two, to make sure that he didn't do anything stupid or out of the ordinary and bring notice to their situation. They were holed up at the Hotel Caymas, a temporary arrangement, a place to lay low until the deal was finished. The load was in a warehouse, and until the time was right, it would remain there. When all the pieces were aligned, a vehicle would be sent to pick up the load, and one of the bodyguards would go along with it. The other would accompany Enrique in a second car. If something went wrong, one could go one way and one the other. It was a proven method for protecting personnel and protecting product, sort of a double insurance policy. There was a critical difference between the bodyguards and Fernando Leon, in that Jorge and Malo knew that they were expendable, and that if anything went wrong and harm had come to Enrique, then they would be dead for certain. If they lost the load, they would only lose a hand. But you can always eat with one hand. They were completely aware of their responsibilities because they had been through this type of event numerous times, and they'd do it numerous times again, if they lived. Jorge and Malo sat grinning at Enrique, thinking all the while. They despised Enrique, but remained loyal to him just the same, out of respect to his father. Malo and Jorge had been with the old man in the old days, when the cartel had been a ragtag bunch of independent cocaine and marijuana dealers who competed with each other in the marketplace of Medellin, who killed each other, who built separate empires out of other people's misery, and who eventually formed a cartel out of mutual need.